Art is not what you see, but what you make others see. And that famous quote is certainly true when it comes to the account of countryside artist Lucy Gray, or as you may all know her, Doodling Lucy. Yes, in this month's special, I am at home with Doodling Lucy, talking all about how she came full circle and ended up back home in the Cotswolds. Although art has always been her passion, Lucy began her social media account during lockdown, and her business has taken on a life form of its own ever since. But this is much more than just doodling. Lucy is using her platform to raise awareness of British farming, mental health and sustainability, and it's also great to talk about championing small businesses and women in rural areas. I am so excited for you to hear this podcast, so I strongly urge you to take some time out after the chaos of Christmas to sit down with me, Emily Ashworth, the Farmers Guardian's features editor, with a cup of tea and listen to this fantastic episode. Right, let's just start with, obviously, your background, because although you're not immediate family is not from a farming background, you have definite farming blood in there.
Yes, yeah. So I think the main link I would say is through my grandfather, who we call him Papa. I don't know, lots of people, the first cousin couldn't say grandpa or granddad, so it started off Papa and then we all call him Papa. But yeah, so he grew up on a cider farm down in Devon. And they've been creating, it's actually really, their history is so interesting. So they've been creating cider now for nearly 400 years. So he and his brothers grew up there. So that was, the first link. And then, I say first, but obviously my family's been farming there for nearly 400 years. He moved to Hampshire, where he ran an arable and beef farm. They've got sheep now. I don't know when the sheep were introduced, so he might have been doing sheep as well, which is where my dad grew up. So my dad and my uncle and aunties grew up there, and that is still within the family as well. My uncle has that farm today, and even though my dad didn't decide to do farming, he moved away slightly, but we grew up in the Cotswolds, which is really heavily farming. So I've got many aunties and uncles who farm, and I spent all my childhood on those farms with my cousins. So it's kind of like, second nature, really. And I never really thought about it, all the farming links, until, the last 5 or 6 years. So, that's my link, my predominant link with farming.
And are you still in the same area now? Is that where you live?
Yeah. So I grew up in the Cotswolds and then went off to university in Liverpool. So I went up north. That was my sort of city life. And then it was at university that I realised just how much I had a link with the countryside and how much I appreciated the green spaces. I'd be going off for walks when I could, and I'd go around Sefton Park and things. I was like, I just need some green space. Like, it's my calling, really. And I came back home after university. I did some travelling, but I realised, no, I want to be in the countryside. I appreciate it so much more, and the quieter pace of life. So I'm surrounded. At the moment, I'm very, very remote. I don't even know if you could call it a hamlet. There's hardly any houses, but it is still very much a farming link. When my friends come from the city, they're always just like, I can't believe this is where you live and things. But a big agricultural link where I live now.
I love that though, because you do hear this story quite a lot of, you don't realise how lucky you are living in such a beautiful area of the country, when you are out in the countryside, and you can go away and you can do all these wonderful things, you can see the world. But I guess it's that sentiment of, home is always where the heart is. Where the heart is,
yeah. And it's something that I just never appreciated as a child, and it wasn't. And I think this is why I think it's so important sometimes to leave where you live, because it wasn't until I moved away, and it wasn't until I went travelling and saw different walks of life, that I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so thankful for where I live, and I'm so lucky for where I live and where I grew up, and I've written it down in blogs and things, and it really does sound like something straight out of an Enid Blyton book, my childhood sort of, I'm sure many people who grew up on farms say the same. We did things like, I don't know, picnics in the pig meadow, and we'd have cousins camping where we would be, we'd set up tents in one of the fields and we'd do all that kind of thing, and going down the stream. Although whenever we were sort of going down the stream, I would always be the one who'd get a boot full, and I'd always be the one who'd have to be taken home crying. So I do feel sorry for my sisters like that. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I'd always be the one who fell over in the mud or something. But it wasn't until I'm older and I'm looking back and I was like, actually, I was so lucky to have that, and I think it's a nice thing to appreciate it, and I never a day goes by that I don't go for a walk and I think how lucky, and I think that's where that definitely the link with my business, and how it's so important to appreciate the farmers and whoever who upkeep the countryside, because that's the reason that I get to enjoy it the way I do, is because there's people looking after it. So I think that's definitely a link there.
So I can quite clearly see now, that linear narrative running through from your childhood to where you are now. So for anyone who doesn't know, you've obviously set up this amazing account called Doodling Lucy, which is the core of it is obviously you creating this amazing artwork in various forms, but all inspired by the British countryside. Do you want to just tell people a little bit about that journey? Because obviously you didn't actually study art or anything, did you?
And how Doodling Lucy started, interesting one. So I was always very much art-based throughout the whole of school. I only ever wanted to do art. I was always in the art rooms, even at lunchtime, even after school I'd be in there. Not mainly, I love art obviously, but I could listen to my iPod. It was the only lesson that you were allowed to listen to your iPod, so I'd be in there switching off, being able to do my art, and it was something that I always wanted to do, but I was told that, not told, but I think when you're at school, you're kind of made to believe that it's very difficult to get a job within the design sector, and there's no money in that. And I went off and did my art foundation year, which if you want to study it at university, you have to do. And I don't know what it was. I just lost the motivation and I lost the love for it. And I just felt like, do you know what? I don't want to do further my education in art. So I went back and thought, what else can I do? And I really enjoyed psychology as well. So I went and studied psychology at the University of Liverpool, but the art never stopped. Like, that was my hobby, that was my passion. It was, every birthday I would hand create someone a birthday card, or I can remember like any excuse to make a card, I'd be making a card. One of my uni friends broke up with her boyfriend and I made her like a
heartbreak card.
I'm so sorry you're going through it. Yeah, a heartbreak card or this kind of thing. So I'd always be making cards, and then I think I got to third year and I was doing my finals, and I was just like, I need some sort of creative outlet, because all this academic work is just getting to me. I need something. So I created this Instagram account, but I wasn't going to tell anyone. It was just my little project. I didn't tell any of my friends, and I was just uploading illustrations. It wasn't cards or anything. And then I can't remember if they found it on Discover or what, but this account started to build and people were following it, and then my friends were like, oh, what's this Doodling Lucy? And I picked Doodling Lucy just because I was like, well, it needs to be, I don't want to be drawing with Lucy. What's another word for drawing? What's another word for illustration? Doodling. So I created this account, and then it just started to snowball from there. So that was back in 2016. And then when I came back from university, I started working my local pub, and they saw this account and they said, oh, why don't you try selling cards and things? And people were asking, why don't you sell cards? Yeah. So I was selling cards in my local pub, just on the bar. And then where are we? Yeah, so that was just sort of just this thing in the background. It was never really what I was going to do. But when I came back from my travelling, I was like, okay, now what? Like, I need to think about what my career is going to be. And I was working in a coffee shop, and I was sort of working on it. It had got to the point where I had an Etsy shop, which is sort of like an eBay but for creative, for a shop to be able to sell your stuff on. And then the horror of 2020 happened, which was lockdown, and I got put on furlough from the coffee shop, and that was just where it sort of not necessarily exploded, but it went from there. Having that time allowed me to focus on it as if it was a full-time business, and I haven't really looked back since.
Yeah.
It's kind of all gone from there. So it all sort of happened. I don't want to say it happened by accident, but it wasn't what I was expecting to do with my life at all. But it's just been this amazing journey.
And I think there's a few things there, really. Number one, you know, that's very similar to people who want to go into farming. You know, you get told these things at school, and actually, why aren't we helping children and kids like pursue their passions? Because that's where success, you know, it's not going to happen in every case, but that's where success happens, when you're given the tools and you're given the direction and the support. So that's the first thing, because you've just come full circle anyway, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. I sort of had this detour through psychology, but actually I've come back to where I was meant to be. And I don't know where I would have been. I'm really glad that I did do that degree, and I don't regret it at all. But had I gone and done an illustration degree, who knows where I'd be now. But yeah, it's funny you should say that, because unless you're from a farming background, unless you've been grown up on a farm, it's not spoken about, is it? It's not how do you get into it? And I see this on Instagram a lot. I wouldn't know the best way to start. I mean, you have to have the confidence maybe to go up into a farm and say, look, I'd love to have some work experience, but it's not spoken about at school at all. We never spoke about it at school. Nothing.
No.
So it's something that needs to be encouraged. I think you need to be encouraged to pursue your passion, and then you realise that actually there are ways of making money from it, and it is, you know, and it doesn't have to be lots of money. It just needs to be enough that you are happy and you can live off it. I think that's another thing. We're sort of made to believe that you have to be doing all these sort of things, when actually no, if you've got the drive and you've got the passion for it, you can live off it. So
And the other side of that is, you know, COVID, you're completely right. It was a horror. It was a horrible few years, and I actually feel like we're probably only just coming out of it. This feels like the first normal Christmas, really, to me. Anyway. But also through that, you know, that period of time, how lovely that, you know, these glimmers of like hope, and, you know, like come out of it all. You know, you wouldn't have had that opportunity maybe if that, you know, the pandemic hadn't happened.
I know, and I don't want to say I hold guilt over it, but it was such an awful time, and so many business struggled throughout it. But there were plus sides to it. I mean, not just the business side of it, but again, I fell in love with where I lived. Me and my sister. I mean, I lived where my parents were for sort of 26, 27 years on and off, and there were so many footpaths that I'd never explored until lockdown, and we went and, you know, explored all these different footpaths and saw the countryside in a whole new light. So yeah, it was horrendous, and I look back on it now like, God, those
doesn't feel real.
Weird, but doesn't feel weird. Like, do you remember that time when we got told to stay inside and like, just not leave a house, and we all just did it? Really weird. But no, yes. So that was a plus side for me, and it gave me the time. I think it gave us all a lot of time, which is a good and a bad thing. But for me, it was definitely a positive thing. So
let's go back to where you said, you know, it kind of exploded, because it's in, you know, I think that's actually the perfect word, because do you want to just, you know, tell us how many followers you've got on Instagram now?
I haven't checked it, but I think it's like 50. I think it's like 15,200. It might have gone up to 300. I don't know. I don't know the exact number.
15.3 right now at this moment in time. I mean, that's incredible.
That blows my mind that people are that interested. It blows my mind that 15,000 people.
I have to say that, like, I do sit there, and once you start watching a video of you creating this image, or, you know, creating whatever it is you're creating, I do find myself then, like, however long later, and I've got to the end, and I feel so much better for it. Like, I just love, I love watching how you create it.
I think people enjoy seeing the process of things.
Yeah.
And even just, and for me, and it's funny because for me, I'm sat here on my own, like I live alone, so I sat here on my own and I'm talking to a screen, and it's almost sometimes difficult to connect with the fact that, you know, 1,000, 2,000 people are seeing it on my stories. But no, people do really like seeing the process of it, even the boring sides for me, where I'm sort of scanning my artwork into my computer, or they love to see that sort of thing. But also I find that people enjoy seeing the countryside and where I live and the way of life. And I've had people who, you know, I've had people who live in Sheffield or who live in Manchester and things like that, and they say like it's my sort of all London, it's my sort of countryside escape, being able to watch your stories and see it, and as an educational tool as well. I think people find it quite interesting in an educational sense. But it definitely blows my mind. I think it was something like, you can Google stadiums, and I think it's like the Bath Rugby Stadium. I could fill the Bath Rugby Stadium with the people who follow me, and that just
incredible.
Scared me a little bit. Yeah, it is. It's such an achievement.
Yeah, about
No,
social
Karen.
media as well. I mean, you'll in farming as well. Like it's the same kind of story, really. You know, all of a sudden, social media exploded for the rural community, and we've really, really harnessed it. And it's you know, as on the occasion, there's obviously a negative side to it, but actually, the positivity that we get out of it and the stories that we can tell. And look, you know what it's done for your business. We need to really harness the power of social media because it's so important in times like these to be able to connect, especially when we've just come out of a time, like you said, when nobody could connect. So,
Yeah, definitely. And I think for farming, especially, for so many people, they have no connection to it. So even if they just follow one farming account, I've learned, I mean, I would say, like I said, I've got this family background in farming and I lived in an agricultural village, you know, and I see it all the time. But there's so many things that I didn't know about, which I've learned through Instagram and through following farming accounts and all these sort of things, and it's an educational tool, and it helps to close that gap between sort of consumer and farming, and make you realise that no, actually they do, you know, that's happening and that's the reality of it. So no, I think Instagram is a tool, and not just Instagram, all sort of forms of social media, like you said, highs and lows, definitely highs and lows, but for me and for a lot of people it's been an amazing tool and educational, definitely.
do you get, just out of interest, do you get any negativity directed towards you?
No, I haven't. It's one of these things that I'm very conscious about. That there are certain ways and certain things that happen in the countryside which can upset people.
Yeah.
So I am wary of that and sharing enough that it's educational and stuff, but also, I don't want to say protecting myself. I'm terrified of getting a troll or something like that. And I know lots of people do.
Yeah, well, it's a legitimate fear.
Yeah, I'm very, very lucky in the sense that I haven't had anything. I think I've had one or two comments which I've literally just sort of brushed over. And I've done illustrations recently in my most recent calendar, which I was a little bit not worried about, but because my business is about showing the true countryside and the true, you know, what's going on and that kind of thing. So I've just kind of had to say to myself, do you know what, you can't please everyone. And the feedback from that illustration people loved. So I was like, do you know what? If it has to get to the point where I'm like, Lucy, stay true to yourself and show what it's like in the countryside, because educational is key, then do that. But no, otherwise, luckily, I haven't had any negativity, and everyone's just so nice. The farming and agricultural community, I think that probably makes up about 60 or 70% of my followers are just so kind. Everyone's always been so nice to me, and yeah, I've never had any issues. But I mean, as the account grows, you never know what people are going to find, or there's always going to, you're always going to get people who don't necessarily agree with what you're doing. Just have to sort of get on with it.
Let's talk about then the inspiration of the British countryside, because I think you said something nice before as well. You know, people in these major cities, everybody wants a slice of the countryside. So, you know, you're able to give them that in terms of what you do on your Doodling Lucy account. But what is it? You know, what is it you love about the British countryside? What inspires you most? Can you maybe take us through a little bit of how you go about creating images and things like that? Because, you know, there's nothing, for example, you know, going out into the countryside for a walk on a spring day, like you can can see how that would, you know, then you would go home and create something from that. What do you love about it, and how does that process work?
Yeah, and it's funny you should mention spring, because spring for me, again, when I was a child, I never really noticed the changing of seasons. But when I came back from university, I remember the first year I came back and I saw the seasons change, and I was just like, oh my god, why have I not been noticing this before? Yeah. You know, when you can hear the birds for the first time, and the daffodils are coming up. That is just, I mean, I'm not really a winter fan, so for me that's a huge inspiration. But yeah, and I find that even just driving around, I'm just driving around these tiny, you know, tiny country lanes, I'm like, this is just beautiful. But yeah, I'm very lucky. So I live in the Cotswolds. It's very hilly around me as well, so that it creates beautiful landscapes. And I've got one of my favourite places, the viewpoint, where I can just see for miles. But yeah, my inspiration, comes from everywhere really, and it comes from mainly sort of going out on walks, but also it's also what I see other people are seeing. You know, that's why I follow so many other accounts, because they post pictures. You know, I'm unfortunately never been to Yorkshire or the lakes. I really need to get up to the lakes, but I mean, that looks stunning.
You definitely do. Definitely.
Yes,
do.
I know,
Yeah.
and I really want to. So something I'm thinking about maybe for 2023 is doing sort of farm visits. I would start with my family farms, but I'd love to go and see other farms. And I don't know if I'm going to be in the country for lambing time, which is annoying, but I'd love to see that kind of thing, and sort of the circle of life as well. Like again, in the spring when you're walking around the fields and you're seeing all the lambs in the fields, and it's there's constant inspiration, constant. So. And it's because it's forever changing. I think the British countryside, it doesn't stay the same, and the fact that we have these seasons, which sometimes don't like winter, but the seasons are such a big inspiration, the change of that. So yeah, and I just I mean I've travelled to a lot of places, and my heart always comes back to the British countryside.
Yeah.
I just love it.
Do you know what I think's nice as well is that, you know, you can be in London, and obviously you've got the iconic Big Ben or London Bridge, but actually, and this kind of, I thought this before when you were saying about, you know, you were describing your childhood, it was almost like a children's book out of Enid Blyton or something. The British countryside in itself is iconic. Like you go to the lakes, it's iconic. Yorkshire Dales, it's iconic. Cotswolds, it's iconic. Like we really
Beautiful.
do forget that.
We do, and I don't think, and I this is another reason why I think it's really important, if you can, obviously, you know, it's dependent whether you can or not, but to travel and see other cultures and other places. And my Australian and American friends are like, oh my goodness, you literally live in the holiday, and it makes me more, it makes me appreciate it more. And I think, do you know what, when you've got countries which don't have the, you know, Australia is not the same. It's got its own beauties. Obviously, it's a stunning country, but yeah, I have Australian friends who are like, oh my goodness, this is, you know, I love seeing all your photos and all that kind of thing.
Where's Jude Law when you need him?
Yeah, I know, he's still not knocked on my door or found him in a country pub. I know, and I drive, and I always make this, I think they make the connection because I drive a red Mini as well, and Karen Diaz is in the red Mini when she's driving around. I'm like, yeah, that's literally me in the snow. I cannot deal with snow and country lanes. When it snowed, I just sat inside like, I'm not leaving, I'm not going on those roads.
I love that.
It is. I think there isn't any other country. I mean, New Zealand again, it's stunning, and it's I mean, maybe like on a par, but people always say the British countryside is really up there with its beauty. Yeah.
And in terms of what your business has grown to now, what have what have you got on your what do you sell through your little business? So it's not just obviously your artwork, you've expanded it, haven't you?
So it started off very much stationery, which was obviously cards, and I then extended into notepads. But the goal is to start doing homewares as well. So I've just released my tea towels, which sold out in 40 minutes. Again, that blew my mind.
Incredible.
Yeah. So I did 100 to begin with, just to see how it would go, and they just went so quickly. And I released a mug this year, which was very exciting. So it's all. Everything has to be made in the UK. That's one thing that I'm very passionate about, that I want to be a British brand. So I had my mugs made up in Stoke-on-Trent, which was very exciting. I got to go to the factory and see them being made. And the tea towels, I need to double check this. And I want to say it's from Lancashire. Yeah, definitely up north. So yeah, the tea towels came from there, and then in the future, similar things, moving on to kitchenware and that kind of thing. And I want to do it slowly, though. I don't want to sort of just do everything all at once. I want to, you know, do it in a nice, I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but go slowly. I don't want to go too quickly into everything. But yeah, that's very, very exciting for the future. And I'm working with other brands as well. So I was lucky enough to work with, and I don't know if I ever say that, I call them shuffles, but I don't know if they're called shuffle. Is it shuffle or shuffle? Do you know?
I mean, potato.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've worked with brands, you know, again, iconic British countryside brands. I've been working with brands like that. I worked with a collaboration for Christmas. So hopefully in the future, working with other brands.
Yeah, definitely.
I've done some work for 4 farmers too. So yeah, very exciting for the future and seeing where Doodling Lucy takes me. But the core values will always remain, and I think that's what makes Doodling Lucy almost.
And as well, can we just touch on the fact, as well, we look at this in terms of farming as well, like there's more women than ever coming into farming, and although I know that you're not actually, out on a farm, in terms of that side of things, but actually it's just nice to see women doing amazing, setting up their own business, like on their own journey. And I think, I just look at the success that you've had, because I've followed you for quite a while now, and it's just isn't it just so nice to see other
females,
doing well?
Yeah, I am forever in awe of female farmers and those working in the agricultural sector. I mean, they are an inspiration to me as well. And then whenever I see them on Instagram, I'm just like, wow. I could hardly drive my Mini, let alone drive a combine harvester or a tractor. And whenever I have these moments, like if I'm walking through a field and I'm like, I catch myself being a little bit scared about the cows, I'm like, Lucy, have a word with yourself. Think of all those women who are working with these cows day in, day out, and they're not scared. Like, you can walk through a field. Or, it makes me so happy as well, because again, it's one of those things which it's not really spoken about, females being in the agricultural sector. And if I can, through my work, shine a light on it, and, do an educational piece on it, or have chat with people about females in agriculture, I would, because I can appreciate how it's a very difficult sector, and there is a lot of work in the sector to sort of bridge that gap. So if I can in any way, even though I am just sort of sat at, I am doing my art and it's my artwork, if I can create a smaller gap and bring some education to it, I will, because like I said, so many inspiring female farmers out there.
And I think actually, if you just take what you were just saying then as well, it can be a difficult industry, no matter who you are, and you've obviously used your social media presence now to expand the discussions that you have as well, which is really, really key. And one of those is mental health.
Yes.
It can't be a taboo subject anymore. Like, we have to, no matter who you are, we have to open up that conversation. So I think that's a really important thing that you're doing there.
So my three core values that you said, is one's backing British farming, and one's removing mental health stigma, and the other's sustainability. Removing mental health stigma is a huge one, even though I might not know. It's harder to sort of get it into my work as such, but I am, I support mental health charities, and I do talk openly a lot about it on my stories. And unfortunately, the backing British farming and the mental health stigma sort of tie together, because again, I'm very aware of the fact that I think it's one of the worst jobs for suicide rates, up with, I think it's vets as well. Yeah, so it's a really important one to talk about, and to, I think, keeping the conversation going. And if it's whether it's through my art, or if it's through a post on Instagram, or supporting mental health charities, it's incredibly important to talk about, which is why I chose it as a core value. And again, I mean, I don't know whether in my lifetime, which is a sad fact, it will get any better, but even if it's a tiny amount, then you're doing... Yeah, and I think that sometimes, I think if I'm posting something which I'm a little bit unsure about, or if I'm talking about something I'm unsure about, I think even if this just helps one person, then it's worth posting. So, yeah, I keep that in mind.
No, I have thought as well that... this is nothing to do with, you wouldn't have had this thought, I don't think, even when you were drawing it or anything. But, if you see an image, for example, of a farmer, you've drawn a farmer and it's a background, that's actually how people feel sometimes. It's just you and the rest of, this vast area that you have come to, be the custodian of. And that can be very, very daunting.
Oh my goodness, I know, and you think, and I have friends, they sit in tractors all day long by themselves. It can be an incredibly isolating job, and I'm not sure how many other jobs are so dependent on the weather, and the weather is something that we have no control over. So there's no... Having a job which is so dependent on something that you can't control, I can't imagine the stress of that. And if it doesn't go in your way, I can't imagine how stressful and anxiety inducing that is. And it's something that's not spoken about. I think we're forever shown in the media these sort of happy farmers who are walking around with a dog and everything's great, and it's like, okay, that's a huge part of it, and people are so appreciative of their jobs and they love it, but also there's this flip side, this dark flip side, which is a huge problem, that it's very, very isolating, and maybe that it's hard to talk about. I think the stigma I think is still very much there. It's a really difficult thing to start to address, but hopefully through my art I can begin. But obviously it's not just me, there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done, and I know that there's lots of charities as well out there which support farmers.
No, I think you're completely right. Everyone can do a little bit, and little bits add up to a lot, doesn't it? So I think you're right. And if you feel like you can change or help one person, I think you're doing everything that you can, to be honest. How has Christmas gone for you then? How have you been extremely... We won't talk Christmas... about the Royal Mail crisis, because that is probably just the biggest stress that you can actually ever think of happening when you've got a business that relies on the mail. But how has uptake been for things that you create? Has it been super busy?
Yeah, it has. It's been so busy. Do you know what? Christmas is such a funny one for me, because I start in July. So I start the Christmas process in July, maybe even before then. So it starts very early, because I've got to design the products, make sure they're all ready to go, sent to the printers, and then you've got to start talking to your wholesalers about them, because I have a lot of farm shops and I supply lots of gift shops and things. And then, because really you stop mid-December because of cut-off times, you've got to start sort of early November, end of October. So I feel like Christmas has been going on for a long time for me, but no, it's been really, really positive. I've managed to get out and do some fairs as well, which is so nice, because again, for me, I'm sat at home on my own. I'm isolated, really, work alone, live alone, but being able to get out to these fairs and meet people and just meet like-minded people as well, it's been really, really fun. But like you said, there's been the blip that is the Royal Mail strikes, but hopefully that will not be coming with us into the new year. And just very excited to be able to I don't want to say excited to move on from Christmas, but when you have been doing it for months, it's nice to do something different, get into the spring collection, see something, start working on something new, talk about something else other than wrapping paper and Christmas cards.
I mean, you are talking to, I'm gonna put it out there, I am the Christmas queen. I love Christmas.
Oh, really? Oh, you love it. I don't want to say you're a lover or a hater, but you either get these people who really, really go for it, or
That's
people
me.
who aren't as
I'm in that
fussed, who really go for it. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not going to knock anyone like that, because obviously I rely on people like that for my job. So you carry on if you want to get. Yeah. I do really enjoy Christmas. Yeah. Yeah.
Though, on something you said then, you are, like you said, you are on your own. How do you, for anyone else, for example, who's got a rural business, they've set it up on their own, it's you're obviously doing something that you absolutely love, but how do you handle that pressure of running a business on your own and getting the orders to where they need to be, and all that sort of stuff?
Lots of stressed out phone calls to my mum, but otherwise, do you know what, and like I said, I'm so lucky that the agricultural community on Instagram is so nice, but I'm also so lucky that the small business community is so nice, and it doesn't matter whether your business is sort of selling the same thing, everybody is so supportive, because I think we all know how stressful it can be. So if I've ever put anything out on Instagram saying I'm struggling, I always get a message from another business or from somebody saying, I'm here if you want to talk about it. And I've made so many friends through Instagram and through the networks and things. And every fair I go to, I'll meet someone in person, we'll carry on talking. So I think it's talking to people. And I think that's one of the main things with mental health and any sort of stress. I think talking it out is so important. And I think people sometimes forget that actually just talking to someone about it and saying, do you know what, I'm really stressed, or I'm really worried about this, I think that's a huge thing to continue with. So hopefully in the future I'll be able to employ someone. I'd love to get some help, and that's obviously that's a next step, because you kind of hit that mark where it's like, okay, I can't grow any more unless I have someone in to help me. But if I have someone in to help me, I need to, it's kind of that. But then I had that with moving out and me finding my own studio, and I've done it for nearly a year now. So yeah, need to just sort of bite the bullet and go for it. Yeah.
And how do you find it quite therapeutic drawing?
Well, my work, oh my goodness, yeah. When I get into the zone and I'm painting, I love I think when I tell people what my business is, they will often just imagine it to be me painting and designing and creating products, when actually that is only about 20% of the work. So when I get to do that 20%, I love it. It's just, I can put my music on or put a podcast or something on, and I kind of lose myself, and I suddenly, think, oh wow, like 4 or 5 hours have gone. Find it so therapeutic. And I know lots of people, like you said, I think you said it as well, find it so therapeutic watching it.
I honestly do. Yeah.
And it's the same with the calligraphy as well. When I do calligraphy, and people watching me write, they're saying, like, it's so therapeutic to watch. So I try and record as much as I can.
It's such an interesting thing to see grow, though, because there is a person in our local area as well who, so you go at Christmas, you go and do a wreath making class, but actually she does calligraphy classes. And I've never ever entertained that idea until I started following people like you and this other woman in my area, and I'm like, that's what I'm doing next Christmas, is an activity with my friends.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and it's, again, like, all these, you think of all these creative jobs that people are doing, but are we ever told about them, or have we spoken about them at school? I was, I think when I thought an artist at school, it'd be like, or an illustrator, I certainly only thought that it would be, you're doing drawings for a child's book. But there is so much more to it. If you want to create a job out of it, you can. And I say that to people. Whenever people talk to me about their passions, I'm like, do you know what? If I can do it, almost anyone can. You've just got to have that drive. And luckily, I don't know what else I'd be doing with my life. So I have it. So.
How long does it take you, like, on average, to create a piece?
It very much depends what it is. Hours? The calendar, so let's say we talk about the calendar, that took me weeks, if not months, because you had to do 12 individual A4 illustrations. But then once I'd done that, which could take me almost up to a day for each, maybe 2 days for each illustration, the digital side of things, which people don't often see, putting it together, that took so long, because you've got to make sure that every margin for the printers is right, and then you've got to move every day. Even if you've created the template from last year, you've got to move every day on and double check that all the dates are right. Add in things like, I've put the King's birthday in this year, so that was something else you got to add in. So yeah, the calendar was a massive labour of love. That was months. I think it took me about 2 months to create. But then smaller things, it would take once you've done one illustration, you can then just get it into the computer, and then you can create more products from it. So that is the beauty of being able to do, when you're creating products, it's definitely easier. So.
And what about, do people come to you to say, will you draw? I know how much farmers and rural people absolutely adore their pets and whatnot. So do you get commissions and things like that?
I do occasionally take on commissions when I have spare time, but because the business takes up so much of the time, it's not something I get to do as much. But I have done a couple of commissions. I tend not to do pets because I find those very, very stressful. Yeah. I know that there are there are so many other amazing artists out there who do sort of lifelike paintings, whereas I'm much more illustrative. The idea of creating a drawing of a pet which looks nothing like the pet, or might upset an owner, that is too much stress for me. So
stay away from that.
Stay away from that. But there are plenty of other people who do them, so I'm like, do you know what, you can do the pet portraits, and I'll do my countryside paintings.
I think that's really important, though, actually, whether you are you starting a small rural business, or you're actually looking to diversify the farm, whatever it is that you're doing, is you have to know your market, and you have to know your strengths and where you're going to fit into that market to be able to stand out.
Yeah, and I think so. To begin with, the Doodling Lucy, it wasn't farming based. It wasn't backing British farming. I just sort of was doing my paintings, and I can't remember when the turning point was. I think it might have been the real sort of snowball was when my friend was getting married, and she asked me to illustrate an old vintage tractor. And I illustrated this tractor, then I put it on my Instagram, and the vintage tractor just blew up. And I thought, actually, this is you know, I need to go down that route and see where that goes. And then it kind of just went from there. And I realised, you know, I thought about my connections with farming and my countryside. And I spoke about back British farming and how important it was. And that for people are very, very passionate about it for a good reason. And that's where I sort of found my niche customers. And I'm so glad that I did, because like I said, everyone's always been so supportive and so nice. And I'm really happy to be a part of that sort of community, even through my art.
Yeah, you don't really get to find, I say this all the time, but it's so true, that the farming community is literally one of the most unique communities that you're ever going to find. And I'm not entirely sure what it is, but there's such a sense of togetherness that you don't find anywhere else. So, you know, to be part of that is pretty special, really.
Yeah, I think, do you know, I think that might stem from the fact that the majority of farmers have grown up in sort of smaller villages, and that community in small villages, or, you know, in those sort of areas is very tight, and everyone sort of looks out for everyone. It's sometimes a double-edged sword, because obviously everybody knows everybody's business, but also there's always people there. There's always people there to help you out, and I guess that's just sort of through Instagram and through social media extended to everybody, because we have access to everyone. But that community feel and that looking out for each other and doing, you know, I can come and help you do this, or I can kind of help you do that, has extended. And I think that's probably where it's come from, that everyone is just so willing to help and so nice.
Yeah. What is it about, what do you love about what you do? What do you get out of it when you've put something together, or sent an order, or you see something that you think, oh gosh, this is literally what I need today to be able to create something? What is it that you love about Doodling Lucy?
I think it's the feedback I get. I think it's just the nice messages I get, and I forget that it's my job sometimes, because if I want to go out and to take, you know, a 2-hour walk on a really nice day, I can, and come back and make up the hours elsewhere. You know, I'm not answering to anyone, but it also gives me the freedom to talk about what I want to talk about, or promote what I want to talk about. And, you know, every so often I'll get a message from someone, and I'll just be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this is my job and this is what I'm doing. And especially with the mental health stuff, that's very, very rewarding. It can be quite full on, because I will share something, and a lot of people like to share their stories too, which is, you know, I'm very happy for them to do that, but you have to be in the right headspace to be able to read that many messages about something similar. And I put something up about grief and Christmas recently. I did an illustration surrounding grief, and that was, I made sure that I did that on a day where I felt like I was mentally, you know, on a good level, because I knew lots of people would be sharing stories, and they did. And somebody said, you know, is it okay if I use this part of this, what I'd written at my mum's funeral, I'm doing a speech? And that to me was just, wow. I know, I was just like, oh my, yeah, I was like, of course you can. So it's that human connection. Even though I am sat here on my own, I still feel so connected to so many people, and the fact that my work is out there, it's crazy. I forget, you know, I think, oh, people have got my paintings on their walls, like that. It's still really mind-boggling. Drinking out of my mug, you know, or people, and it's beginning. I think one of my goals was that I wanted to become a recognisable brand, and I had someone message me the other day saying, oh, Lucy, I had a friend over, and they said, oh, is that a Doodling Lucy? I think it was a Doodling Lucy calendar. And she was like, oh yeah, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's beginning to, you know, be recognised. So there's so many things which I love about my job, but I think the connections and that is one of the main ones.
Are you part of the Artful Farmer's Wife Facebook page?
I'm not. What's that? I haven't heard of that.
So just let me get it up. The Artful, it started basically as, obviously there's loads of, and this is just for you, just so you know about it, really. I'll get it up now, but it's become huge. So it's like almost 14,000 members, but it's like a private group, so you just have to get accepted into it. But it's a place where people, well, women only, and it was rural women. They kind of come together over art.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't. I need to see if I can join. Would they let someone who's not a farmer join?
Oh, 100%, because it was originally set up by Beth, who's incredible, and it was a chance for, you know, anyone can be lonely at any time, but as a woman on a farm, if you're not necessarily farming full time, or you know, you're kind of in between, you're almost in a limbo sometimes. So it was for rural women who had like a craft or had little businesses to kind of come together and feel part of a community. But there's so much, it's so nice to see, like I said before, all these women creating all these things, having these small rural businesses. But yeah, you would get yourself on there because people are so interested.
They are, and it's again the support side of things when people are supporting each other. I never think of the small business as a competitive, you know, I'm not going to give you my secrets, you're not going to give me. Obviously, there's certain things which you wouldn't necessarily share because you've got to protect your business.
Yeah.
But if anyone sort of asks my advice, you know, I'm always wanting, because I want everybody else. There's enough room for everybody, and it's just not, you know, I don't want to be not giving advice and that kind of thing, because so many people have also given me advice and so many people have helped me throughout my business. I'd love to be able to help other people too.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of At Home With. Now, next month we'll be at home with somebody completely brand new, so don't forget to check it out. In the meantime, head over to the Farmers Guardian website to check out more of our Over the Farm Gate podcast episodes. That's it from me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next month.